journey starts here. The first chapter in what England hope will be an epic tale. Well, the crowd has been urged to clap the taking of the knee. It is met with almost universal applause.
Hello and welcome to The Nexus. Today we're looking at the Euros 2020, one of the greatest football tournaments on earth, and it's being played in 11 countries right across Europe. Hundreds of millions of people are watching, which means that gestures like this, taking a knee, are being seen all over the world. Not all teams are doing it, but notably the England team is taking a knee before every match. And while some people support it, it drives others up the wall. The England team got off to a flying start by beating Croatia 1-0 over the weekend. Their victory pleased the fans. It's coming! But taking the knee before the game divided opinion at Wembley. While most fans reportedly cheered, others booed.
They're booing BLM. They're booing the football organisation for supporting BLM.
I wouldn't be booing taking a knee. I think everyone's got the right to do what they feel, to support what they want.
People cheering believe the gesture demonstrates the England team are against racism. And that message still needs to be stated in 2021. The people who booed don't necessarily disagree, but they're offended by the gesture for multiple reasons. First and foremost, they say it's an American import, associated with the Black Lives Matter organization, whose leaders have espoused Marxist ideas and campaigned to defund the police.
Being against Black Lives Matter isn't the same as being against black people. Booing the taking of the knee at football matches isn't the same as being against black people.
And it isn't just white British people who say this. A number of black professional footballers who speak out against racism are also sceptical of BLM, including Nottingham Forest's Lyle Taylor.
We are hanging our hat on a Marxist group who are simply, they're looking to defund the police. They're looking to use societal unrest and racial unrest to push their own political agenda, and that's not what black people are. We're not a token gesture or a thing to hang your movement on.
Now, England's manager Gareth Southgate insists that taking a knee is about opposing racial discrimination and not necessarily about supporting BLM.
Some people seem to think it's a political stand that they don't agree with. That's not the reason that the players are doing it.
But you can see why some fans are not convinced. Players like Raheem Sterling openly supported BLM protests.
You know, this is something that's been happening for years and years, and you know, just like the pandemic, we want to find a solution to stop it. And at the same time, this is what all these protesters are doing. They're trying to find, you know, a solution and a way to stop the injustice that they're seeing.
Of course, the association with BLM isn't the only reason some people disagree with England taking the knee. Some accuse players like Raheem Sterling of being hypocrites, campaigning against racism in the UK while playing for Manchester City, for example, which is owned by investors in Abu Dhabi, where migrant workers, usually Asians and Africans, often live in inhuman conditions. Now, in a similar vein, there are those who suspect footballers engage in social justice causes to raise their own profile. Sterling's fellow England player, Marcus Rashford, is managed by Rock Nation Sport, founded by music producer Jay-Z. The agency tends to promote black entertainers and sports people and has also spent money bailing out BLM protesters in America. Rashford's social media following has jumped sharply since joining the agency. Well, there's also that belief, that concern, that some players are being coerced into taking the knee, even if they don't believe in it. Here's Lyle Taylor again.
They can't not take the knee. They cannot, a white player cannot stand there and say, I'm not taking the knee because of this or that, because they're branded racist. I've been branded racist and I've been racially abused by black people.
Of course, another aspect of this debate is why football's governing bodies allow taking the knee, but stop players from supporting other causes. For example, why was Man City's manager Pep Guardiola fined nearly $30,000 for wearing this yellow ribbon in solidarity with protesters in Catalonia? At the time, they were being beaten senseless during independence protests. The FA not only fined him, but warned him about his future in the game. OK, let's bring in our guest now. And conveniently, we have two people on the left here. who are essentially for taking a knee. They think it's an important gesture. And two people on the right who are against it on the whole. Ian Payne, top left there, is a sports broadcaster and radio presenter. Ben Cobley is an author and journalist. Esther Kraku is a social and political commentator. And finally, we're joined by the former Premier League footballer, Michael Johnson. Welcome to the programme, everybody. Ian, I'd like to start with you. I know, as we've set out already before this debate, that people are, in your words, confusing taking the knee with BLM. Are they wrong?
I think it's a problem to try and conflate the two, and the people that don't like the taking of the knee and the people that boo the taking of the knee, whenever I've spoken to them on the radio, say it's because of the link to the Black Lives Matter movement, which they see as a left-wing organisation, a Marxist organisation, which wants to defund the police and create a bit of anarchy. And you try and explain that really the two are separate. This is just about equality for everybody, but they still don't accept it. So we've got ourselves into a bit of a pickle with this phrase.
Now, Ben Cobley, you wrote an article recently. Actually, this is kind of one of the reasons why we're doing the programme, in which you say that it's nonsense to pretend that taking the knee has nothing to do with BLM, and you chart the evolution of it in English football. Tell us more.
Well, yeah, I'd actually quite like to read out a couple of quotes, which are from last July or late June, July. Now, first we have Keir Starmer, who is leader of the Labour Party, so on the left, and he said of taking the knee, it was an expression of solidarity, of recognition of the importance of the BLM movement and what they stood for across the world. So, I mean, there's a really close sort of identical thing between taking the knee and the Black Lives Matter there, and it's associated with left-wing politics. Then we have Boris Johnson responding on taking the knee. He said, if you think what happened with those police officers standing at the cenotaph, this was on a BLM protest where the cenotaph was defaced, I think, and Winston Churchill's statue had BLM written on it. So Boris Johnson said at the cenotaph, they were being really insulted, these police, in quite aggressive terms and being told to take the knee. So, I mean, the whole gesture is associated with a movement and some quite aggressive, highly charged politics. You know, it was very divisive almost from the beginning. So for the footballers to be continuing to do it and pretending it's got nothing to do with politics, I mean, there's a clear party political divide here between left and right. So I think it's really badly misjudged, and it shows how the communications of the FA and the whole football world have got wrapped up in progressive politics.
You mentioned in your article that players were wearing shirts, instead of their names on the back, they had Black Lives Matter on the back, and that some of the broadcasts used the Black Lives Matter symbols. And then you said things changed. When did they change during last year, and why?
Well, from what I recall, and what I've recorded is the first sort of backtracking for the football world was when Black Lives Matter, the UK Twitter account, tweeted out some stuff which was quite anti-Israel. And so that got quite a response from some people. And I think the Premier League backtracked and said, well, actually, we're not in favour of this political movement. We're just in favour of, the general message. And I mean, the general message, it's a classic of left-wing politics when you appropriate a message which not everyone should agree with, who's not a really bad person, and you make it your own and use it to attract support for yourself. So they just said, we're just in favour of the message, of anti-discrimination, anti-racism. When, I mean, the damage is already done. That's really what I'm saying.
Ben, if some people say it is a gesture towards being against racial discrimination, why don't you just take it at that? What would you suggest they do instead?
Well, I think this thing has now been going on for a year, with every single football game taking place in this country having players kneeling. So I think really the impact of it has, as I think Zaha said, and maybe Lyle Taylor said as well, has way gone. The association, the negative association is there. The political division is there, so the divisiveness is there. So I think for a start, this gesture is very badly judged. What they do instead, I mean, what they're saying now, or what they've been saying recently, is they're against players getting sent racist messages on social media. Now, this for me is a matter, one, for the social media companies, and secondly, for potentially politics and political legislation, you know, of lobbying government and saying, look, can we more closely regulate media companies?
Let me bring in Michael Johnson at this point. Michael, you'd like to see the gesture continue, right?
Yeah, I just think it's great we're still having these conversations, and it's interesting listening to the conversation. What it is doing is keeping it on the table, you know, in people's living rooms. People across the world are still having conversations, whether it's a positive tone or a negative tone to it. And I do get the understanding that, you know, it may have lost its impact, but for me, it's still having the same impact because we're here months later still discussing it. But yeah, I get, you know, what is next, and that's, I think, the question.
What kinds of people do you think are opposed to it?
I don't think so much people are opposed. I think the understanding and maybe the messaging, but quite clearly, footballers, what I speak to, coaches and managers, what I've spoken to, have completely distanced themselves from, you know, the association with the political message of it. What I would say is that, you know, it goes way back into the 17th, 18th century, the taking of the knee. You know, it was around a black person who was trying to argue the case around freedom around slavery, and that's where the knee started being taken. Then you could go into more recent time with Martin Luther King, who took a peaceful knee taken in the 1960s, and then we start talking about 2016. So this is not nothing new. This has been something that has been. But you know,
Michael, I don't think it's true that it doesn't irritate some people. Let's bring in Esther on that point. I know it actually does irritate you, Esther, actively. Why?
I just think, you know, you're going to have a hard sell telling people that, you know, a few months after the entire Premier League decided to support Black Lives Matter on the back of their jersey, somehow them taking the knee has no association to that. You know, there was not one dissenting voice within the players in the Premier League. And, you know, I make the point that no one ever goes to football players for political or spiritual guidance. We don't know them as the sharpest tools in the shed. But the point is, you know, how can you possibly sell people that the fact that they've worn Black Lives Matter literally on their jerseys for weeks, and then afterwards they're taking the knee and there's no sort of association or link to that? That's pretty hard sell. I mean, they could literally do any other gesture. They could link arms, they could hold hands, they could put their fist in the air. You know, people that were fighting for racial justice in the 1950s and 60s weren't necessarily taking the knee. There were people that were putting their fist in the air as well. You know, there were always gestures that were associated with racial equality. I think it's really unfortunate that this is what they chose to do months after wearing Black Lives Matter on all their jerseys. And I think to paint people that don't agree with it as racist is also disingenuous, because I think people can be just as against the Marxist movement as they are against racial inequality.
Ian,
and we should just bring it back to the game.
Ian, probably the slim majority of people in England, for example, support taking the knee. Around 39% are against it, whatever. I mean, it is still divisive, though. And you do wonder, when people are watching the national team on the world stage, even if it alienates 1 in 3 people, for example, these people are thinking they're representing the entire country, and they're making this gesture in my name, in a way, because they're representing the country on the world stage, and I've not been asked about this, and I'm not happy about this. Shouldn't they just leave it out and just play football?
I don't really, in a way, it's not really for people like me to decide that. It's for people for whom this is about to decide whether or not they continue with it.
Are you saying, sorry, Ian, let's not beat around the bush. You're saying because you're white, you don't really have a say in this, and only black people should decide, right?
I don't have a final say in what, whether we continue with a gesture that helps people of colour level up society. I don't think it's really up to people like me. I might be completely wrong here. And I just feel that, if you don't like it, just ignore it. You don't have to boo it. That takes it completely to another level.
I take your point, but then you've got people like Lyle Taylor. Sorry, Esther, just give me a chance here to say this. You've got people like Lyle Taylor, a black player, saying that there is a coercive atmosphere around this gesture, and that not one player would refuse to take the knee because they would be branded racist, their career would be over,
but if you're a black
they'd be
player
vilified.
like Wilfried Zaha, or you're like John Barnes, who doesn't see any point continuing in this, fine. Somebody somewhere sort that out, whether it's the football authorities, whether it's representatives of the Black Lives Matter movement, whatever it happens to be. But I just feel that the way it's been conflated with the political movement of BLM has caused a problem. I don't know what you do. I certainly don't think you should stand there with a sort of Black Power salute.
Okay,
I think
Esther,
that will cause even
come
more
in, Esther.
problems.
No, I don't understand why we're pretending like there is not a direct link. They actually wore Black Lives Matter on their jerseys. They spent screen time wearing it for various matches. Are we going to pretend? And what is the point? Are you saying enough Black people have to come out against it before? This is one of those things that I find really annoying, because it's actually patronizing to the people that it says it's defending. We just want to keep it about the game. There have always been movements within politics to try and stamp out racism. Everyone has watched those matches where people like Samuel Eto'o had, bananas thrown at them. Everyone knows that there has been an issue with racism in football, especially in countries like Russia and in the Far East, right? But to patronize Black people and say, oh, actually, there's some Black people that appreciate it, so let's keep it going. No, these people, the link didn't come out of anywhere. They wore Black Lives Matter on their jerseys for millions of people around the world to see, and now they're doing a gesture that is directly linked to this organization after wearing that on their jersey, and we're saying, actually, we don't want this association. Try and put out the message of anti-racism as you can. Hold hands, link arms, put your fist in the air, but don't do this blatantly linked movement and say, actually, it's for you Black people, so be quiet and just be appreciative of it.
Sorry, Ian just wants to come in for a second. Ian, come in.
No, but it came about, nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. Colin Kaepernick sat down for the national anthem to complain about inequality. He then spoke to a military veteran who said, we take the knee for our fallen comrades. And he thought, there's a good idea. It had nothing to do with the BLM movement. They adopted it.
Michael Johnson, if I could just ask you about this coercive nature that Lyle Taylor was referring to. Do you think, as a former player, that there's any room for any dissent amongst the players, either for their club or for their country? Imagine if any of them felt uncomfortable, would they be able to go with their conscience, or would they feel obliged to fall in line with the prevailing sort of thought?
No, there's several leagues up and down the country. I know majority of games from the Premier League have been screened, but right the way through the Championship, League One, League Two, into the non-league pyramid, we've got players who are doing their own thing, whether that is taking any, whether that is just standing up. My old personal club, Derby County, opted to stand in unity on the halfway line. I think we're moving away from a really important question here, and I think it's something that we all agree with. And I understand the for or not taking of the knee, but I think the real issue is that we all agree that there's a big problem in society. Footballism is a snapshot of society, and what
Michael,
we're highlighting there is that there's issues in society.
I wanted to ask you about that, Michael, about the broader society, because back in March, we had a Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities report headed, the Commission chairman was a Black man called Tony Sewell, and according to them, Britain is a model, paraphrasing from a newspaper here, but Britain is a model for race relations and inequality between different ethnic groups, may be caused by other factors. And they go on to say that essentially, the report concludes that while Britain is not a post-racial society, the success of ethnic minorities in education and the economy should be a beacon for other white majority countries. Do you accept that Britain is doing well or not in race relations?
I can't talk for the report, but what I will say when I look right across the leadership of the senior leadership right across the UK, whether it's in health, whether it's in the football or education, What I see is a distinct lack of diversity, whether that's talking from an ethnicity point of view, from a female point of view. I just see a distinct lack of equality right the way through the game that I currently play in.
So in particular, for example...
And stats will show that.
Yeah.
I've been part of a research that has been with the Sports People's think tank for many years, and the stats have not changed since
Michael,
2012.
I mean, you other... Yeah, come in.
Yeah, sorry, I'll try and be brief. I mean, football, for example, I mean, black people have done very, very well in football. I think the issue has been that the large complaints have been about managers and coaches coming through. And hopefully that will improve. And there's a bit of positive discrimination going on to help that. But also a big issue has been in the media. And I think this is what this issue is has actually achieved in a sense, whether you like it or not, is it's institutionalized a lot of positive discrimination in the media, especially in bringing black presenters in, black ex-players to commentate. Like I said, I mean, I'm not always positive about that. I think it's sometimes counterproductive. But no, sorry, I should shut up. I said I'll be brief, so I'll
No. I mean, but how is it counterproductive? You ought to answer that point at least.
Well, I think, I mean, it's great when you promote people who are ignored and are good, you know, and we have seen some of those. I think, for example, in the Euros, we can see now, like Eni Aluko, who's come in, you know, and also Emma Hayes, you know, on the co-commentating. They're both brilliant, both really, really good. And they probably wouldn't be where they are without this idea of positive discrimination. But I think it's counterproductive when it promotes people who are not so good, right, and take it for granted. When they get criticised, they say that it's, you know, it's because people are racist.
Esther,
so there's a sort of controlling workplace environment that goes on there. Sorry.
Firstly, I think the whole argument of positive discrimination is just disingenuous in general. I don't think there's any sort of discrimination that's positive. I think one of the merits of British society is trying to base it on a meritocracy. I quite frankly don't care what the color of anyone's skin is that I'm watching. I think this obsession with trying to get sort of this proportional representation of the 3% of the population is black, then you have to have 3% of presenters being black, then this is, and you know, 50% of everything has to be women. I think it's completely disingenuous. And the reason why you can see that is because people are only obsessed with it with visible roles, with leadership roles, with stuff in media, with stuff in banking and finance. You know, you never hear people complaining about diversity in sewage draining or plumbers or carpenters. You just want it to be high-profile roles that people can see, so you can actually say, pat yourself on the back and say, oh yeah, we put this many black people here, or we put this many women here. It's completely disingenuous. I think it completely goes against the spirit of Britain, which is a meritocratic society.
Yeah. I think, Esther, I think you've charmed Ian Payne here. Come in, Ian. You're smiling for some reason.
I put it this way. I don't think I could say what Esther's just said. That's the first thing. And the other thing is your general point about British society being perfect and that, what do we call it? Do we call it an inquiry report?
Yes.
I think that the proof of that is social media. You just have to, because people can do it anonymously, yes, you find out what people really think. I don't know a single black footballer who's not been racially abused on social media. And I think that proves we have still got a long way to go.
But Ian, Esther was mentioning about proportionality, and she mentioned that something like 3% of the British population is black.
The UK.
And as we know, yeah, the UK population. But of course, in the English football league or in the game, generally, you've got something like a third or a quarter to a third of players are black, and something like, would you say, 5 to 6% of management positions are held by black people, which would indicate a massively overrepresented in playing and equal proportion. Now, may I finish, please? May I finish?
Sorry.
Proportionate or perhaps slightly overrepresented in management. So where is the problem?
Well, I think what you have to do is you have to separate. I know people say, oh, society and football, they're just the same. They're not really, because there's a higher percentage of black people within professional football than there is within society as a whole. So you have to look at it from that point of view as well. And when you look at that, of the 92 managers in the Football League, I confess off the top of my head, I don't know how many are black, but I'd be amazed if it was beyond single figures.
But what you're saying basically is you want overrepresentation on the field and off it in the benches.
Well, over-representation, you can call it that, or you can just say that, you know, it's full of very good footballers. That's what I would say.
Go ahead, Esther.
I think the point should always go back to who is the best getting the job. I personally, I know people may mean well, but honestly, I don't think it really goes very far. Like, I'm sorry, you're like, I'm not buying it. I don't know many people that
before
are
they've seen.
saying,
They just look at
because
them.
there are this many black people in society in general. I want to see this. Like, you know what? Just leave people to do what they're best at, and let's trust the system that the cream will rise to the top.
Esther Kraku, Ben Cobley, Ian Payne, Michael Johnson, thank you all very much. We could have definitely gone on a bit longer. Sadly, this is it. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our other episodes again, do look at our channel on YouTube, Nexus TRT World. Until next week then, goodbye.